Mr. Barr from Kentucky. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and Ranking Member Thompson. I have the privilege and responsibility of representing Central Kentucky in the Congress, and it may not surprise you all that I'm going to talk about horses and bourbon, because that's what I represent, the horse industry, the thoroughbred horse industry, and the Kentucky whiskey industry. So these are yes, and Iowa corn goes into that bourbon. So let me first talk about horses. This is a $6 billion industry for our country, and we need to update some of our tax laws to continue to encourage that investment. So first, the Racehorse Cost Recovery Act is before this committee. The legislation makes permanent the modification of accelerated depreciation allowance for racehorses to allow a 3-year recovery period for a racehorse. The default is 7 years, but the useful life of that asset is 3 years. And we need to make that permanent law. That's before the committee. We would encourage you to look at that, because that encourages investment in these very valuable racehorses, and it would encourage more investment that would, again, very much accelerate this dynamic industry. Also, the Racehorse Tax Parity Act, this would shorten the holding period for racehorses to be considered eligible for the long-term capital gains treatment. Oddly, if you realize a capital gain with a racehorse, you have to hold that asset for 24 months as opposed to the 12 months. This makes no sense. We need just to level the playing field on that asset class, make it a 12-month holding period in order to get that capital gains treatment. On bourbon, Mr. Thompson, Ranking Member Thompson, we're trying to replicate the wine industry. The bourbon tourism is exploding in Kentucky, just like Napa and Sonoma. We want to do what you've done, Mr. Ranking Member, and we want to continue to attract that kind of tourism to Central Kentucky the way you have in Northern California. And so one of the ways to do that is to fix some of these tax problems with the bourbon industry. One is the Duty Drawback Clarification Act. This bill would clarify that all whiskey products are commercially interchangeable and eligible for the drawback program by creating a single 8-digit harmonized tariff schedule for whiskeys. Under the current HTS, spirits categories such as whiskeys have several different HTS numbers at the 8-digit level. For example, Scotch whiskey and bourbon have their own HTS codes at the 8-digit level, meaning that these products are not commercially interchangeable for purposes of drawback. So when we import Scotch whiskey, that has a separate and different 8-digit code. We need to make sure that bourbon whiskey, a uniquely American spirit, again, a multi-billion-dollar industry growing every day, has that interchangeability with our imported whiskeys. When we can compete on a level playing field, Kentucky bourbon will definitely get into that market share in Europe and Asia, but we're punishing ourselves because we have this duty drawback disadvantage. And then finally, the rum cover-over. So the rum cover-over has expired, and the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico's rum distilleries work in tandem with many of our U.S.-based spirits companies. The territories, as well as the companies, all rely on the cover-over to meet their fiscal obligations. Making the cover-over part of a tax package looking back to 2021 as well as forward would be the responsible course to cover. And if you want to help American spirits, American Kentucky bourbon, extending that rum cover-over would be helpful not only to the territories but also to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I see I have about 45 seconds left, and let me just take that opportunity to encourage the committee to fix this R&D tax credit. We've got a lot of manufacturers in Central Kentucky. We need to eliminate the 5-year amortization requirement for R&D, and we need to continue expenditures in the taxable years in which they are occurred. That's going to make sure that we can compete with China in manufacturing. Also, I would also encourage you all to look at this Opportunity Zones Enhancement Act. The bill would create a tax exemption on interest income earned by tax-paying banks from loans extended to qualified businesses operating in opportunity zones. I know that you all have updated and provided some enhancement to the opportunity zones in the most recent tax package. From the position of the Financial Services Committee, tax-paying banks want that level playing field with credit unions. Give them a tax exemption to deploy private capital into these opportunity zones to help distressed areas. And with that, I'll yield.